Our guest today has served as Congresswoman from Illinois' 9th Congressional District for 13 years. Prior to her election, she served for 8 years in the Illinois General Assembly. Her top priority in Congress is to provide universal health care coverage for all Americans. Our guest today graduated from the University of Illinois and lives in Evanston. Please welcome back to the City Club of Chicago, Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky. Congresswoman, there we go.
Thank you, Jay. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the Vanna White kind of assistance here. I appreciate it. Yes, thank you. I wanted to put this sign up because this poster up, which if people who are close, someone accidentally spilled orange pop on it. But other than that, we're going to hear a lot today about class warfare, because the president has called upon wealthier Americans to pay their fair share. And so we've already heard from the Republicans. And I wanted to put up this poster because I think that it is a description in many ways of class warfare, and it's pretty easy to look at that sign and see which class has won. This is, for those in the back, you don't need to see any numbers. Essentially what this is increases in income from 1979 to 2005 by income group. And the last one is the top 0.1% of Americans. And you can see that over those years, that essentially all of the growth has gone to the wealthiest Americans. This is not because of some act of God, Rabbi, or some natural disaster. This has been a matter of policy. In fact, if you were to overlay the percent of union participation over those years, that line would go pretty much diagonally down. And if you were also to overlay productivity of American workers, you would see that line go straight up. So we have more productive American workers, but almost none of the growth has gone to them. And in fact, there's other data that says that the share of growth by the share of wealth gain from 1983 to 2009, that the top 5%, 81.7% went to them, and the bottom 60% lost 7.5%. That actually working families have done worse. I want to personalize that a bit. When I was growing up in Chicago, lived in West Rogers Park, I believe it was a very different world. I'm the daughter of a furniture salesman, and my mother, when I was in about 3rd or 4th grade, went back to be a Chicago public school teacher. And at that time, the American dream was really alive and well. I went to public schools. Everybody I knew went to Chicago public schools. I went to Rogers School, graduated, and I graduated from Sullivan High School. And by the way, I just went back this June and spoke to the graduates at Sullivan High School as an alum. And I stood before these beautiful students, and I said, you know, I stood on this stage exactly where you are next year will be half a century ago. And the whole audience, including the parents, went, oh! It was like, oh my God, she's still standing and talking, you know? But I also said to them, I said, you know, at that time, Sullivan High School was pretty much all white. and pretty much all Jewish, which I am. And we had to leave the sheltering walls of Sullivan High School in order to see the real world. But I looked out at these students and I said, you have the real world right here. The diversity of students at that school, which is looking great right now, actually, is just remarkable. I asked how many were the first in their families to graduate from high school in the United States of America. And I would say almost half the hands went up. Dozens of languages now are spoken at Sullivan High School. It's a different school, but in many ways I think does prepare its students for the world that they live in. It was a time when one man could work in the mills that were thriving on the south side of Chicago. One good union job. He would have health care for the whole family. He would have a pension. I was talking to some retired steel workers the other day, send their kids to college. And I reckon these were the 50s, and for most Americans, not all, anything seemed possible. I know that this was a time of the continuing great migration from the South, African Americans coming to the city of Chicago, and though they all weren't the best jobs, there were jobs to be had, and immigrants coming over here. If you worked hard, you could expect to live a decent middle-class life where you could actually dream of owning a home, you could buy a car, and that was normal. That was the normal of the time. And today, after decades of attacks on organized labor and passage of tax policies that favor the wealthy individuals and corporations, growing disparity in income, the greatest since 1928, the squandering of budget surpluses, turning of a blind eye through deregulation to Wall Street, and we now find that dream is really drowning in a sea of joblessness. And so I am very proud today that the President of the United States, both with his speech on jobs not long ago and now in announcing how he sees that we can make our economy grow and work, but do it in a fair way, is an attempt, I believe, to finally address this and not have us settle for a new normal. That means that young people cannot aspire to even the same level often that their parents have achieved. You know, we passed a wonderful health care bill. I was very proud of that effort. I played a role in that as a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee. But we said that young people up to the age of 26 can stay on their parents' policies, and that's a good thing. But it is also an admission that when young people go into the workforce, that it is very hard, one, now, to even find a job, and two, to find a job that will provide health care benefits. Something that was really standard as I was growing up. I don't remember families in the same kind of crisis as they are today for lack of health care. I talked to the president last week on the phone. I had been trying to reach him, and he called me. It was a great little moment for me. I was in the Energy and Commerce Committee, and the staff comes in and says, "Can you leave to take a call from the president?" I said, "Yeah, okay, you know, sure." And so I congratulated him on the jobs bill, and he said, "Well, I want you to know that we borrowed liberally from the Schakowsky bill in creating this legislation." And I say that to say that as a progressive voice in the Congress, and hopefully a progressive voice for not only my district, but in many ways in the country, that it is possible to help to shape and influence the kinds of policies that come out of the White House and ultimately out of the Congress. But I am very concerned that the United States right now is at a crossroads, that the kind of America that I grew up in is one that seems so yesterday, and that there is a feeling now that what we need to do is lower our expectations, resign ourselves not to be as successful as individuals and families. But I want to tell you something. I believe so strongly that without a robust middle class in this country, that the United States of America will not be able to successfully compete in this global economy. And I believe that, thank you, Charles. Thank you, Charles Benton. That this is far more than the struggling that I see out there. One of 4 homes in the Chicago area we just read is underwater. The increase in the poverty level. Kate from the Chicago Food Depository can talk about the number of people lining up now within my district, in Skokie and in Des Plaines and throughout these solid suburban middle-class areas. People who used to volunteer at food pantries who are now in line in order to get food. The numbers of our youth unemployment, the percentages are astronomical. Women who at the very first were kind of immune, it seemed, they were not as affected by the unemployment rates because there's so many layoffs now in the public sector, which is notoriously has people of color and women as part of that workforce. And those are the people who are now affected by the real trickle down, that when cuts come at the federal level, they trickle down to the state, and they trickle down, Mayor, to the local level, where budgets have to be reconciled and people are laid off. And the question is, are we as Americans willing to accept not only second-class status for our families, but second-class status for the United States of America? And the president has made it absolutely clear that that will not work. What businesses need right now, what the corporate sector needs right now, is not more confidence, it's more customers. And the only way to get more customers, I had breakfast at a little restaurant on Bryn Mawr this morning, Nookie's, just new. They put a lot of money in there. Okay. And they had a very successful first week, Carol Ronan, and you were in there, I know, that's good. But just down the street, there is another little restaurant that failed called Flourish. They said they failed to flourish as hard as they tried. They were not is that the name of Flourish? Yeah. They were not, it's not so much that if they got a tax break, they could stay open, although that would help, and that's part of the president's bill. But they need people with money in their pockets that can actually go out and buy the beautiful pastries that they made there, that can stop in and afford to have a little breakfast that they serve. And so what we need to do is to literally create jobs. And I hear from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that somehow those public sector jobs are not real jobs. I offered a bill called the Emergency Jobs Act to restore the emergency jobs to restore the American Dream Act that creates 2.2 million jobs. How do I know? Because every dollar connected to the bill has to go to a job. We create jobs in a number of different areas. Yes, infrastructure, I think that's mainly what the president took, fixing our schools. We have schools all over the country where students are sitting with their, and certainly here in Chicago, crumbling ceilings, asbestos, no wiring to actually accommodate new technologies. This is not the kind of learning environment that we need to be a first-class country. So we create a school improvement corps. We create a parks improvement corps where you could hire young people that would go out and rehabilitate natural and cultural and historic sites in our country. A student job corps that would create 250,000 part-time work-study kinds of jobs. A neighborhood heroes corps, teachers, firefighters, police, a health corps. This is the only sector that's really growing right now, but we need to be able to, as we add more people under this new health care bill, to be able to have more health care workers. And money is an issue, so we hire them. A community corps where we have 750,000 jobs to do what's needed in our community. Energy efficiency upgrades, recycling, reclamation, urban, rural, and a child development corps. We need to have more child care, early child development workers. We have to help the early Head Start program that is on the chopping block. These are all things that need to be done. And will they help to also jumpstart the private sector? You bet they will. Let me give you an example. The FAA was shut down because the Republicans did not want to extend the Federal Aviation Administration and fund it. It was mainly over a jobs issue, a union issue. 4,000 FAA workers were furloughed, but 70,000 construction workers lost their jobs because they no longer had the funding to work on airports. So public and private sector inextricably linked. And so these, of course, are real jobs. By the way, the right wing was after me all last week because I go on, I'm not exactly sure why, but Don and Wade Don and Roma in the morning, Don, Wade, and Roma regularly. I kind of have fun sparring with them. But I was asked this question: how much of my income do I deserve to keep? And the implication clearly was 100%. I said, well, no, people don't deserve, and it's really not a matter of deserve, but people need to pay their fair share. I cited the cancer researchers at the NIH, as well as the cop on the beat, or our national security, a sense that we are all in this together. And that is really the philosophy of America that I knew. Those 50s were the time of the Great Compression, where there was the least amount of divergence between the income of the wealthy and the middle class and those who aspire to it. You know, in China, they graduate more engineers than the rest of the world combined right now. We've seen 3 solar companies go bankrupt, not just the one you read about where the Republicans are trying to make a big scandal out of the government loan that went to them, but 3 solar technology companies that make the stuff have gone bankrupt. And so now we invent these new technologies, but we don't make them in America. And I believe that this notion that somehow these good manufacturing jobs are gone forever. Yes, there'll be different jobs, We will never make steel the way that we made steel, but there are steel manufacturing plants, modern steel manufacturing plants. The Democrats have an initiative called Make It in America. And I think that this is exactly the kind of thing that we can and should do. There's a school called the Austin Polytechnical Academy that is training young people to go into, and you know, at my local repair shop for my car, they're telling me, you can't just hire someone good with their hands anymore, a mechanic. You have to have the computer skills these days. You have to have a good education to do almost anything now. But we do have the people who want to do the jobs, who want to go to school, who are capable of making our economy strong, who want to work in manufacturing plants and want to work at a graduate level. They want to do the research, to do the technology and the innovation. We are the most innovative country in the world. I want to invoke, and we all should, a kind of patriotism about what is our vision for America going forward. And I just refuse to accept the notion that all of the work that is done, that is by people who have work, that most of the benefits, that all of the growth in our economy has to go to the so-called job creators. That's what rich people and rich corporations are called these days. But again, I believe that it is ordinary people that are job creators. And that's what Henry Ford understood. When they started making those Model T Fords, he wanted to make a car that people that worked in that factory could afford to buy. And that is exactly the kind of notion that we have to have in our country right now. So this is an epic battle of very different philosophies. What I see from the Republicans right now is an effort not only, as Mitch McConnell says, to defeat Barack Obama. And what else I see is that they are willing to bring down the economy in order to do that. I see my colleagues on the other side of the aisle betting against the economy, willing to hold hostage the full faith and credit of the United States of America in order to make sure that not one hair on the head of a millionaire or billionaire is taxed in order to help run our economy. That was over obviously the debt ceiling fight. And I just think that winning is not just about whether or not Barack Obama wins or Democrats take back the Congress. It's whether or not we believe that we have a country, e pluribus union, that we're all together, all one, many parts, all together, that it is liberty and justice for all in our country. These are the very ideals, I think, that at this very moment, this very day, and it will be debated vigorously, that the president is engaging in class warfare, that spending is what is bringing down this economy. And let me just say about that jobs equal deficit reduction, that jobs equal economic growth, that when people are paying taxes and not getting unemployment insurance benefits, which they don't want to, they want to have a job, that's when our economy will grow. So it's revenues, it is cuts in spending, but it is also growth that we need in our country right now. And you know, the Americans have a very short memory. It's only 10 years ago that we had a budget surplus, that their economists were worried that we were going to pay down the public debt too fast. Can you believe it? I mean, we were actually having those kinds of conversations only 10 years ago. So it is possible to have a balanced budget. It is possible to do that under Democrats. It is possible to have a strong economy where everyone can flourish. And that's what I've been about, trying to articulate that the crisis in this country is a jobs crisis. It is an income inequality crisis. It is a disappearance of the middle class crisis that we need to address right now. That yes, we need to address the debt and the deficit, but even on the Simpson-Bowles Commission, which I was part of, we did not begin to do deficit reduction or cuts until 2015. We put that off in order to make sure that we were able to create the kinds of jobs and stimulate the economy the way that we needed to. So as Americans, I hope that you will look with an open eye at what the President has proposed today, which is about fairness, which is about balance. It's about creating the good jobs that we need for the United States of America to continue to be a leader in our world. Thank you very much.
Don Samuelson, I believe. What was normal in the 50s and 60s with respect to the role of lobbyists, political contributors, pay-for-play contracting?
There was a decision by the Business Roundtable in the late 70s, during the Carter years, that it was very important to create an organization so that all of the business community could lobby together for overall policies. And that was really kind of the start of the growth in the lobbying business. Before that, there really wasn't such a presence. One of the problems with that kind of disparity in income, too, is that people in the red zone are not putting all of their money under their mattress or buying more yachts, but they're getting more involved in the political process. And with the new Supreme Court ruling, Citizens United, what we're seeing are unlimited, undisclosed dollars flooding into races, including the recall races in Wisconsin, up to the presidential race, where we will see literally millions organized by the Koch brothers and Karl Rove going into politics now because, as Mitt Romney said, now corporations are people. And they have First Amendment rights, and that was the court decision, which I think was a very bad decision. So there was not that kind of presence, and therefore, I think, skewing of the policy-making arena by the by special interests.
Well, we have several questions. Some of them I'll try to group together. But this is from Jeff Riley, Riley Public Affairs. Do you think the White House will continue to back off from issuing EPA regulations, such as they did with the ozone and greenhouse gas rules?
I certainly hope not. I was disappointed with that decision because, of course, the goal, and you can hear it in my Energy and Commerce Committee almost every day, every time we have a hearing, is to actually get rid of the Environmental Protection Agency altogether. The President said in his jobs bill, because that's one of the keystones of the Republican jobs bill, or proposals, is to get rid of regulation, to get government out of the way. And the President made it very clear that, yes, there are some things, and he had identified 500 regulations that were either redundant or unnecessary, but that he was not willing to compromise the health and safety of Americans. And we have people in that committee, in my committee, of course, that don't believe in global warming, very clearly, and that believe that those things that we do to try and reduce carbon are wasteful and job-killing kinds of proposals. So I think that those of us that think otherwise need to be loud and vocal. And by the way, there's so many jobs that are created by finding these new clean technologies. The president has talked about that as well, and we need to make those investments. So I hope the president won't back up any further.
We have a question from Bruce Handler. With all the discussion regarding deficit reduction, little is heard about reducing the cost of the 2, some people say 3 wars and subsidies to big agriculture, oil companies, etc.
Well, actually, $1 trillion in the new plan that the president said is presenting to this super committee, the 12 members who are going to be coming up with $4 trillion in cuts. $1 trillion of that, he said, will come from the wars, from the ending of our presence in Iraq and our drawdown in Afghanistan, which I've actually signed a letter favoring quicker, more extensive drawdown 10 years later from Afghanistan and bringing that money home. But he does find $1 trillion to designate for that. I wanted to, there was one element I wanted to mention. When I was on the Simpson-Bowles Commission, I presented my own plan that protected. I thought when you were going to talk about the items in the plan, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, that there is no reason, and if people have questions about that, I can answer that, for us to make major cuts in those successful programs. Social Security, through good times and bad times, has never missed a check. And again, in regard to that kind of income disparity, I spoke to a group of seniors at the Breakers the other day, middle-class seniors. They did not know that one only pays into the Social Security through the payroll tax, the Social Security Trust Fund, up to an income of, on the first $106,800. They had never heard of that because they never made that kind of money in their lifetimes, and were just aghast at that. Why would people below that pay on 100% of their income, and people over that, not at any level, pay even one penny more? So the simple way, actually, to fund Social Security going forward is to simply lift that cap in some way so that, and then we're done. We fixed it. It's over. Next 75 years. And so this idea that somehow that young people, and I bet you young people maybe in the 50s were saying too, I don't know if Social Security will be there when I retire, but it is, and it can be, and it will be if we make the smart cuts, the right kinds of cuts. What the president proposed today is nothing right now at all on Social Security. Good, because it doesn't contribute to the deficit, not a penny. Social Security Trust Fund has $2.4 trillion in it right now, going up to $4 trillion. And the Medicare cuts that he proposed, nothing goes into effect there until 2017, and most of those cuts have to do with making the program more efficient. Of course, the Republicans, I don't know what they'll do with that anyway, because they accused us of cutting Medicare by $500 billion when it was all about making it more efficient. But anyway, so there are ways to deal with the entitlement programs. A lot of people resent that because they pay for it. They pay for Social Security and Medicare, feel an ownership of those programs, not that it's some gift to them from the government. So I definitely think the wars are a big piece of it, and then also more taxing the wealthy in a more equitable way.
wanted to get one in for Judith Turk. What can we do to pass the Buffett raise taxes for the wealthy, and how do we prompt buy made in America?
You know, I was just talking to a woman who's worked in the garment industry for many years, and she has mostly done her work overseas and is for fairly large companies, and is really tired of that and wants to create a company here where they actually make garments. And I think there is a growing movement in our country of people who would like to buy things that are made in America. In many industries, it's very hard to do. The things just aren't made here. So if you want to look for the Made in America sign, you can't even find it. But I think there is a taste for that. On the issue of taxing the wealthiest Americans more, I say to my colleagues, have the courage to stand up and follow what Americans are telling us. 80% of Americans say the fairest way to deal with this budget deficit is to tax millionaires and billionaires. I introduced a bill, the Fairness and Taxation Act. I start out at, if you have a taxable income of $1 million, you pay 45%. It ratchets up. If you make $1 billion a year, which people do, I don't know if anybody in this room, anybody? $1 billion? Would pay at 49%, which is lower than the highest tax rate during the Reagan administration. He was my model. And historically, actually, a fairly low tax rate. Well, what the president has established now is what he's called the Buffett Rule, that no longer should a Warren Buffett, who paid about $7 million in taxes, but his effective tax rate was 17%. He should not be paying, no one should be paying a lower tax rate than average Americans. And what is average Americans? You know, in this country right now, the 400 wealthiest Americans have as much wealth as half the rest of the population, 150 million people. 400 Americans, 150 million people. And so, you know, those people, a lot of them are paying at about 15%. Hedge fund managers, a guy named John Paulson, $5 billion in 2010. He pays at a 15% tax rate. It's just not right. It's just not moral. It's just not fair, and it's not good for our economy. So how do we get that to happen? We have to mobilize people, get them out of this feeling, again, about this new normal that, no, I want to see people with their hair on fire, saying that, you know, we have got to demand of our members of Congress that these kinds of fair proposals be supported. I'm an organizer. That's what we've got to do, is organize that sentiment into political power.
Thank you, Congressman. Congressman Jan Schakowsky, we thank you for your presentation to the City Club today.